Today we're going to be building and painting the Sarissa Percision's Old West Hotel. So the first thing we're going to do for the Sarissa Percision kit is we're going to look at our instructions and try to organize all the pieces and pop them out of the sprues correctly. You'll do this with maybe a hobby knife or maybe a punch of some kind. Just be very careful when you're punching them out. Also, I used to use a wood glue, and I've come to enjoy this Gorilla Heavy Gel Glue, which actually keeps it and it doesn't fly all over the place when you put the glue on and stuff like that. And you can just put a dab of that glue where you need it, and it sticks really fast to the MDF. And that's the heavy super glue from Gorilla, the Gorilla brand. But here I'm taking a knife to punch these little, precious pieces out, as I call them, because they're in a solid piece. And sometimes you can punch things out with just your thumb, as long as you're really, really careful. But these spindly pieces that don't have like a centerpiece, like I'm popping them out with my thumb right there, I'm doing it very, very gently. I'm not putting a lot of pressure. If it pops, great. If not, grab your hobby knife, which I have in my hand and I set down there. You just want to make sure that when you're popping them out, you're really, really gentle. And you definitely want to pop them all out before you begin assembling the whole thing. There's a reason for that in our next step. Once you have all your pieces punched out, you begin to organize them. Looking at the instructions on what's the ground floor, what's the top floor. And by doing this, you kind of look at the picture, and you also look at the instructions of how many windows are upstairs, downstairs, and so on and so forth. I will say that back door piece does go on the bottom. The first step we're going to do after we organize our pieces, we're going to put all the window frames and door frames on, and the top part of the sign that's going to be for the Emerald Hotel. And I didn't side that actually until I finished building this. But you want to put these frames on first. It saves tons of time, and you can actually pick them up piece by piece. You can sit them on a flat surface and work with the frames itself to make sure they're in the right position, in the perfect position for what you want to do. I wouldn't recommend building it and then putting these on, because it'll get a little hard to maneuver. It's just a lot easier to do it this way. And it also says to do that in the instructions as well. And once we go through all our door frames and all of that using our Gorilla Glue again, we're going to move on to the next step, which is going to be looking at the instructions and seeing what their next step is. And their next step is to organize the pieces yet again, putting the sign on, and moving on to actually building and constructing the actual hotel itself. And once your sign is complete, we are going to move on to the next step in the instructions, like I said. And we're going to reorganize our floors, and we're going to grab our base, and we're going to start putting our deck together first. The instructions clearly say to put this together before you move on and build the walls. I can see how that can be helpful, because when this piece is dry and ready to punch in is when you're done completing and putting the bottom floor together. You put the long railing on first. I'd recommend dry fitting them to make sure they look correctly. You make sure you got your piece fitting correctly, and then go and glue. And don't forget that top part of that railing, glue it together too. It helps support it. So once we get the both sides on, we're going to put the bottom legs on for the porch and glue it together, and then we'll move on to the next step. There's the finished product right there, all done. So we can move on to constructing it. Now, what I recommend to do is glue two sides. Typically, I glue the front side of the model where the door is. It depends on the model really, but I glue the front side first, connect it with one of the side pieces, get it nice and even. You can actually take a 90-degree ruler and set it in there to make sure it stays there. But while that is drying, I will run a line of glue on the base where we're going to glue it to. That way, when I'm ready to actually set it down, the glue is good and tacky, and it will just set that base out of the way and start gluing the rest of the walls together. I only put glue, as you can see, on those notches. That way it's cleaner, and trust me, with the super glue, it will hold. When I was using the wood glue, it wouldn't hold as tight as this stuff does. So after we got all four corners together, it's not pulling away, it's actually tight. We'll fit it in the notches into the base itself, where we already put some glue down. And you got to do this rather quickly. You can't waste time when you're doing it this way. But I assembled all the walls, pushed them into their base, make sure it stays there, it's good and tight, and I will set that to the side and let that dry for a little while. Some people like to paint all the pieces first before they glue it together. As a matter of fact, that's what Sarissa actually shows in a lot of their videos, and they would be right. I'd love to paint these prior to them being assembled, but this method actually really works for me, and I just like seeing it built so I can imagine what colors I'm going to use. It's kind of hard to do when it's not assembled. So here I'm gluing the front porch on for the upstairs there. Just putting very little glue on each one of the contact points. That way it's not, gonna fade my paint, because I'm gonna use a lot of stains, I should say, but not stains, but Agrex earth shade and things like that, where the MDF kind of soaks it up a bit, so it will see through the glue if you use too much. Now for the top floor, I like to glue the front on first. I have to hold it there for a minute, make sure it holds very nice and tight, and then I glue my outside walls once that is fixed. And I set that aside as well, put the roof on, make sure it fits right. This one here, I had to put the back notch on first, which I find with most buildings, you want to do it like this, where you set it down on the one side and push it towards the front, and then you can set it right on the top, and there you have it. You have the complete assembled hotel, a Sarissa Percision hotel for their Old West. And here are a few still shots of the building itself after it's completely built, the front to back, and it's completely dry before we move on to painting. It looks nice, it looks great, just assembled. It looks awesome, and I finally have an idea of what to call it, and I finally have an idea of how exactly I'm going to paint it. And it's you will see shortly. So now let's get on to the painting. So our first step is we're going to take both floors off and grab a color called wood grain. It's Vallejo wood grain, and it's a very opaque color, especially when you're putting it over the top with no primer necessary whatsoever. We're using the wood color underneath as kind of our base color. It's real bright, and when you paint this wood grain color on, it almost acts like a filter over the top of it and gives it a real faded, real worn wood look. And we're using a flat brush, just an old hard bristle flat brush, and spreading it out. And I'm not allowing it to pool heavy. And all we need is one coat of this brown paint. As you can see, you just kind of spread it around. And if you have little bitty faded spots, that's okay, because the wood itself looks faded. So there you have it. It's a faded wood grain look. You do it over all the windows and the back door. and it just gives it that, in the background look. So next thing we're going to do is grab another color that's works exactly like the wood grain, called natural grain. I believe it's natural wood grain. Yeah, natural wood grain, which is kind of a yellowish color that's going to tint. And really all it's doing is tinting the natural MDF color underneath and making it look yellow. And it's a one-step process. You don't need anything else but this one yellow to make it look yellow. It's pretty amazing. And the next step after the yellow is painting our green around the sign, on all the doors and the windows, and just the front, and our railing for the deck. And you'll see the results are pretty great. So at this point, I painted all the green on the hotel itself, and you'll also notice I have a nice little sign there, and I'll tell you how I did that in a second. But I painted all this base coated green, and after I finished that, I put this sign on here, and I painted these poles green. I painted the doors and the windows in the front, just the front, not the sides. The sides we're going to keep pretty plain, just the color of the side of the hotel itself. Really all that's left after this is to do the exterior floors and the interior floors, and it's pretty easy. I'm probably going to wait to do the interior until I know exactly what I want in the hotel, and seeing if I can maybe get some partitions for some rooms to put in the hotel. If not, you will see the way I do the outdoor floor. It'll be the same way I do the interior floor. It's just that I'm gonna wait to see what I'm going to do with that. But as far as this right here up top, I will take the top off to give you guys a better look on what I did here. So believe it or not, it's super easy to do something like this. I purchased some stencils that comes in a pack of like 28 of them, which is great because I can use them for science fiction or moderns or anything like that. But this was the closest I could find to Western lettering, and it's also unique. And when you use these type of letters, you don't have to be perfect, because Western buildings, obviously they were hand painted. So these didn't have to look perfect. And what I used for the letters itself is I used these stencils, and as you can see, there's kind of a little bit of leftover around the letters where I was, marking them in. I didn't use paint. What I used was a permanent black marker, just like this from Sharpie. And I was able to do the letters next to each other. You didn't have to worry about them being perfectly straight. If you wanted them to be perfectly straight, you could, like I said, you could, draw a pencil line and erase it. But I find when you do that, pencil lines kind of never completely come off of these type of buildings like this. I mean, they do, but you'll still have kind of a mark, gray mark, and I didn't want to mess with that. So another thing I did is I used another stencil, this one here. As you can see, it's the banner right there. And this other banner for this other side is this one right here, except it's flipped. So, or something along those lines. There we go. It's the same type of stencil for both of these banners. And what I used for that was a brown permanent marker. It's a Sharpie marker. And I just made it brown to make it two different colors so you'd be able to see it. And then I took some ivory. I don't use white, I use ivory because I believe white is just too bright for this sort of application. But I use Vallejo ivory. It is white. It's not pure white, but anyway, give you a close up. I hand painted these with a insane detail brush. Just did the letters, and when a little secret to doing letters like this is you do your straight lines, and then when you're doing your ovals, you do a half oval. Like if you're doing a circle like this right here, this was done with a stroke to the left and then a stroke to the right. And obviously do one line at a time, take your time. Oop, I bumped the camera. Take your time when you're doing it, and if you mess up, it's okay, because this permanent marker right here will fix any problem that you have. You can actually color right over that white, no problem, and it's not even noticeable. I mean, you can't even see that I messed up on this one. So Free soap, by the way. And then over here, I did the same thing, and I wanted it to look, I didn't want it to look as sharp as this one up here. I wanted it to be like they changed their prices, you know, went from $1 to $3, and they put up front on there. And I freehanded that with an insane detail brush from Army Painter. But that's how I did that. It's super simple. I mean, really, you can make any of the Sarissa Percision buildings as complicated or as easy as you want. I mean, you can use markers, you can use crayons, you can use anything, and it looks good. So the next step, though, since this is the Emerald Hotel, we are going to hold on, let me get this in here. Put the back in first. We're going to dry brush. Well, I'll keep this off. We're going to dry brush this green, and we're going to dry brush it in a little emerald. But we're not going to do a heavy dry brush. We're kind of going to do a brush over to kind of make the paint look like it's peeling with 2 tones, and just to brighten it up a little bit. So I got my emerald, I'm going to put it on the palette and show you guys how I do it. So I'm using a big, huge brush like this. This is a really hard bristle brush. Any dry brush that I'm doing on buildings, I like to use a bigger bristle. So I'm going to dab it in the paint. I'm going to take most of the paint off on a paper towel to where I can get it to where it's still kind of, if you flip it, you still kind of get some paint there. And then I'm just going to start dry brushing across it. And no particular direction, just kind of moving as I go in random direction, you know, back and forth, up and down, that sort of thing. It just adds a little bit of color, a little bit of worn, makes it look a little worn, and highlights it just a bit. Because I don't want to highlight it too much. I just want to do it just enough so that that undercoat deep green shows through. So as you can see, or I think you can see, it's a little bit different green. And I'll have still shots of this after I'm all finished so you guys can see. You can kind of see that this is it's brightened up to an emerald, and it has some highlights to it. So I'm going to continue doing this on the all the green that you see here. And when I get to the little bitty spots like here, I don't obviously want to mess up this sign. So when I get to these spots right here, I'm just going to take this brush and just barely touch it. Or you can use a smaller brush, but you just want to do it in parts. You know, you don't want to do it on the whole entire thing. All you're trying to do is just give it a little bit of highlight, a little bit of punch. I'll be back in a sec. All right, and now with the highlight done, it looks like the Emerald Hotel. It's a little tough to see, but you can see it on the top. It looks like the paint's taken a little bit of wear, and it has a highlight on it, on all the doors, the poles, the railing, and everything else. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna paint the roof. Now this is a really simple process, for me anyway. You wanna make it look, you know, old and worn and like a roof. So what I use is, give it a little mix, is what they call dark brown Model Air color. And I take it and I just drip it on the roof. No primer needed, just like the rest of this building. I haven't used a single bit of primer on it. And I'm using the wood color of the building itself, or the MDF itself, to make my wood color, or my base coat, a wood color. So I'm kind of using the color wood that's here to highlight what I'm painting on the top. You just take a flat brush or a filbert brush like this, and you just go to town like this, back and forth, back and forth. And what you're trying to make it look like, it's kind of a highlighted sloppy roof. Not necessarily a wood, you know, like wood panels, but yes. It's not going to look, you know, exactly like a wood roof, but really all you're trying to do is make streaks, because we're going to come back later with this same paint, not with this same paint, with other paints to highlight it. So obviously I spread it around as thin as I possibly can, and you already got streaks. So you just, back a brush in my mouth, drip more on there in the spots that need it, just like so. And continue on, and you want to do this to the top and you want to do it to the back of the sign that's right here. This is where the sign is. So I'm going to do this and I'll be back to show you what's next. All right, at this point we're waiting for our roof to dry. It is an model air color, so it takes a little bit of time to dry, but as you can see with the streaks, it kind of sort of looks like there's wood paneling up there. Now we're going to start prepping our floor. Now our floor is already wood color. Why not take advantage of that and use some Agrax Earthshade to basically do a base coat wash on it. And I know I say wash funny. And we're gonna take our wash, we're gonna take a big old brush, and we're just gonna throw it on there and spread it around. You don't want it to pool. You just kind of get it in the cracks and crevices just like this. And already we have a different tone to our floor. And it already looks like a floor. Now I did take a knife and a hobby knife, and be very careful, and I made some little cracks in the wood as well. You could take some steel wool if you want to make the wood panels look a little bit more realistic. But once you see what I do here, I made just a couple notches as if somebody, you know, scuffed a boot across it or something like that. And I'm just spreading the Agrax. Now the PDF or the MDF will soak it up and make it look a little bit faded, and will leave natural little bumps and things like that in them. Now what I like to do with this sort of thing is this doorway is, you know, the most active area and the most steps. So I like to take a little bit extra, just kind of fan it out from the door. And if I got too much on my brush just like this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and get some off my brush on the part that I have not worked on yet. Spread it about and take more off. And it leaves that part, I'm going to dab a little bit, leaves that part as if that's the part where people are walking the most, is on this piece of wood. Now never fear, we're going to be blending that with more washes. As you can see, it's a little bit darker. That's where people walk out the door and stand on the balcony. And while we're waiting for that to dry, we'll come down here to the floor, the bottom floor. If you're working on a single building with only one floor, you just have to wait for that to dry to do your next wash on it. Now we're going to be using a series of washes, and we're going to making some of the panels a little bit darker than the others. I'm putting on a little bit heavier on the bottom as well. But I'm still spreading it around, not allowing it to pool. You really don't want it to pool. You just kind of put it on there and spread it about. There we go. Without it pooling. And it's on there. And this way I did an opposite. So I started at the door, let it dry, and as you can see, these sides over here are a little bit heavier. And what that does is it gives it a look of dust and dirt from the front door. It's a little bit lighter, not as dark as the outsides, where people do walk, but not as much as in and out at the door. So this part we made darker. This part up here we made like they're wiping their feet, or there's dust coming off their feet. So it's already colored wood color now. So what we're gonna do from that point on, we're gonna let that completely dry, and it'll take a little bit of while to dry. I'd say maybe 30 minutes. And then we're gonna come back with Agrax again, and we're gonna single out some wood panels by themselves. And we're just gonna streak a little bit more of our Agrax on just those panels, and it'll separate your panels to make it look like there's a couple different colors of wood on those panels, and you can already see it, and it'll make them stand out more. So I'm going to continue doing this, and when I come back I'm going to show you how that's finished, and we will do our roof. We'll do our dry brush on our roof, and we will do our final touches on the outside of the building. All right, now I went with a Reichland flesh shade and a sepia for the actual floor, and it's still drying. As you can see, there's a few different boards that were picked out. I may pick out a few more later if I'm not happy with what I got here, but I'm pretty happy with the result there. So this has dried up here, the roof. So what we're going to use is a basalt gray and a natural gray. And gray, if you ever seen some, buildings or older buildings that, have dilapidated, or their wood has, has been weathered a lot, it has some gray in it. So what we're doing is we're leaving this a natural wood type color, and we're going to be highlighting as if the wood is rotten or going bad. You guys gotta kind of have the idea of what I'm going for. So I'm gonna put some basalt gray after I shake it up good. I'm gonna use this big, huge, hard bristled brush. I'm gonna dip it in my paint, get some of the paint off, not all of it. If I swipe it on my hand like here, and I just go in any direction. It doesn't really matter at this point because you're just going to be spreading the paint out, and it's going to start fading it. You're going to start seeing the lines blend together and making it look older and like a roof. So we're going to get a little bit more paint. We just dab it, we'll wipe it off, swipe it twice, rub it on your finger, and looks like I got too much off. And oh, there we go. See how there's big spots there? You just keep blending it while the paint's still wet. Then you act fast, and you will not see the blotches at all. So there's my roof so far. It's starting to blend together, starting to look like a roof. This is a quick paint job. I mean, I obviously can do a heck of a lot more to it, but I want to get this on my table and show you guys how easy it is to make it look good on the table. So I'm going to finish this up with the basalt and the natural gray and come back and show you guys the final result of the hotel, which I have named the Emerald. Back in a minute. All right, there you have it. There's the roof. It's not perfection, but it looks like a roof. It has the look of a worn roof. And as you can see, the floorboards here, you're seeing some of the boards are different colors and worn and things like that. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could put a dry brush across this, a light dry brush, or some more boards to pick out, which I may do at a different time. But that completes the building. I mean, it is ready to go. It's ready for gameplay. It looks pretty awesome. So thanks for joining me for this video or series. I will be back with another one where I will be painting some medium buildings like this. As you can see, it looks kind of familiar, does it not? But we're doing some different things with those, with some different, same techniques, just different styles and colors and things like that. So hope this helped you. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Please tell a friend. Please spread the word. I'd really appreciate it. And last but not least, from me to you, ta-ta! And don't forget, I have still shots of this building after this.